recording. Let's just give it a second. And welcome, everyone. It is May 24th, 2022. This is the Cloud Custodian bi-weekly community meeting. Welcome. I'm your host, George Castro. As always, these meetings are recorded and on YouTube, so be cognizant of that. And as usual, it is under the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. With that, I've got the URL to the notes in chat. Does anyone not see that? I don't know if it shows up after, if I post it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I was wondering how persistent it is when people join. So here are the notes. KubeCon came and went. Kapil, I think you were the only one that went. Any TLDRs you want to share with the group, or?
TLDRs. Okay, so two different things. One, got to meet some of our top folk. Technical operations committee. No,
oversight. Isn't it oversight? Yeah.
Technical Oversight Committee, sorry. And one of them is our sponsor as far as taking us through an incubation. Effectively, most of the paperwork's done. We're just waiting for the submit. I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that happens in June. And the other one, it does require additional binding votes from the talk, and so we were out talking to other folks. And then separately, I also attended the Cloud Native Security Day on Monday, Tuesday. In that context, I think that one of the dominant themes was definitely supply chain security. And so looking at going to move Custodian Docker releases at a minimum to being signed. There's a separate track of work with the update framework and PyPy, GitHub's warehouse project around trying to incorporate that there. That's been on a multi-year, almost a decade-long time frame. So I'm not necessarily going to put any time or attention to that, but I think at a minimum we should start at least signing our Docker images, and then additionally. With regards to that, getting to fully automated release, primarily driven through GitHub Actions, is another goal that I think plays into supply chain security as well, with additional sign-offs as well. All right, so beyond that at KubeCon, it was crazy. It was cool seeing the conference come together. It was my first international trip since COVID, which is still a bit of a headache. You have to check every country you're transiting through for their entry requirements, et cetera, et cetera. But it was so good to see people in person, per se. So on that note, I will pass the mic back to George.
Awesome. And welcome, Stephen. We ran into you at one of the virtual workshops that we did.
Yeah. Hi.
So,
yeah.
awesome.
I'm excited to meet. I'm excited to meet you guys.
Yeah, that's great.
I use the hell out of Cloud Custodian. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, the way it works, I paste it in the notes, and we do an open agenda. So what we do is we have the agenda there. So if there's questions that you want to ask or something, feel free to tack it on there. And then just as the discussion goes, we'll get to it, and then we figure it out.
I don't know if Stephen joined after you posted it into the Google chat, but Google chat basically is invisible to people that join after. So
I already took care of that now that I know that. Yeah. All right. The next one is we're going to Scale. So that's the Southern California Linux Expo, one of my favorite shows. I haven't been in a long time. I will be there. We're going to have a booth and all the goodness. So if you're planning on going and use Custodian, ping me. I'll take you to dinner. We'll do something fun.
It's a fantastic, for anyone who hasn't been before, it's a fantastic conference. It's very developer-oriented, developer-centric, lots of interesting projects from, Postgres to robotics, take your pick, and lots of things in between. So
actually, here's what I
do recommend it. It is, for those that are traveling this summer, it is right next to Reinforce and Forward CloudSec in Boston. It's coast to coast. We will also be at Forward CloudSec, which is also very practitioner, developer oriented, but a little bit tailored towards security.
Yeah, so we'll be at both coasts that week, so that should be a lot of fun. All right, next. With Kapil being knocked out with COVID and going away to KubeCon, I went ahead and started to rush something here. Well, rush is probably the wrong word, but a membership proposal. Oh, sorry. Oh, goodness, hold on. I forgot how to browser. 1 second. There we go. So lots of open source projects have like a governance.md, and this was an issue that was filed that we need to have, which is what does your membership structure in the project look like? And if you see something like Kubernetes, it has like 6 levels, everything from like a drive-by contributor to like a maintainer. Knative has tech lead roles and things like that. So I looked at the Knative one mostly because that one I felt was just enough structure without having like big city Kubernetes stuff. And I know you're gonna have opinions on this.
No, I just also wanted to state up front, just as a top level thing, that CNCF does not dictate governance structure for a project. It merely requires that each project have one that's top line.
Yes. So, being familiar with a bunch, I already had some in mind that I thought I was going to do. I knew Kubernetes would definitely be like too much. It's just too much, right? It's like a New York City and we live in a suburb. Knative I like because it kind of had those primitives, but really, really chiseled down. But I also didn't want to have just something like, do what you want, vote, and all these kind of things. So I basically kind of lowered it down to 2 levels. A member, which would be like a contributor who's actively contributing, and then a maintainer, which would be someone who can actually merge code. And then I kind of outlined what each of these positions would look like.
So 2 thoughts.
Mhm.
One, we haven't discussed how we're adding new maintainers since we've been doing this, and I think Darren
We have not. Yes.
qualified through enduring contribution to the project to be a new maintainer. So like to make sure we cover off on that at some point. Secondarily, have to go through the details on Knative. I would say that this history has and their origin and some of the politics around it pre their CNCF, et cetera, are interesting and maybe isn't the best example for us to use from a governance structure. But I haven't looked at the details on that governance structure, so I'm also going to wait. I just wanted to put a comment out there with regards to that.
So the structure will be very similar. I think, I don't want anyone to have any preconceptions because most of the text comes from what is currently Knative. So hopefully none of the drama or whatever that the origin story comes from. Basically, the gist is there are 2 levels and we're defining what they are. And if you look at if we looked at Prometheus or any of the other ones, they all kind of are using the same language. I just wanted to basically say Knative was the one that I kind of started to as kind of the master template and then cut out a bunch of stuff. CNCF does not care how our governance model is. We could keep it, BDFL-ish, as long as what we enforce what we define. So notice this is not a pull request because that would be, I think, we'd be nitpicking too early. I think what we want to maybe consider is having this as a start of the discussion of what do we want that membership to look like? Do we want it to be very bottom heavy with like a lot of people with spread tasks, or do we want it? I think we probably want a little bit less bus factor BDFLism. But I did stop short of doing things like defining a committee or a talk or anything like that because a lot of that stuff felt too big city. So I figured I would throw this big old dart at the dartboard and then see where we need to aim. That's why it's not a PR. I'm not looking for line by line,
Yeah, I remember looking at the Envoy one and thinking it was interesting as well. But again, glad thank you for kicking it off. So
do you want me to do another round and do a deeper dive on Envoy? Because I'm a governance nerd. I can if there's projects that you're like, I want to look more like these, I can absolutely go do that and yank stuff that you might feel is appropriate.
Yeah, I just have I don't know. Knative has some interesting history. It just causes a reflexive reaction a little bit. The but I think it's still useful. I think so the other thing we need from a governance perspective is we also have a lot of emeritus maintainers.
Yes.
We haven't defined a formal process as far as archiving or moving to emeritus. I've done it in the past based on it's been a year or two since this person's committed.
Yeah.
And so would be interested in trying to, as part of the structure, governance structure, to define that process as well.
Okay, so you want me to define a emeritus structure?
Process per se.
Process. Are you leaning more towards 6 months or like a year? Because I feel like a year feels...
I would do a year minimum. Yeah.
Say a yearish. Check out Envoy. Let's see if there's anything we can use there. Anything else?
Given I haven't read any of it, I can't.
Yeah, I know you haven't read it. Yeah, so
that.
Once we kind of decide like what we're looking at, then I think we're going to be nitpicking over, the little numbers or, what is it? I think it's important in a lot of these governance structures. They do strict kind of like, you need to do X, Y, or Z for like 30, 60, 90 days. And in a lot of these places, I've added provisions due to staffing, that like these are generally a guide, right? So like I think it'd be terrible if it was like, well, AJ is doing a pretty good job, but they've only been participating for 59 pull requests and we want 60, right? Like we're looking at like a guide to kind of define what work would look like, but then give the existing maintainers the ability to just say, you know what, they've been around long enough and I trust them. Is that kind of jive with what we're thinking? Because my concern with making gated,
I mean, when I looked at enduring contribution in the past, it has been something that is effectively sustained over time. So done over multiple months, and like ideally up to 6 months, and is inclusive of both engaging, and there's many different forms of contribution, like from just helping people in chat to doing documentation,
Gotcha.
there are many different forms that as a project we value and support and appreciate and want to reward from a meritocracy basis in terms of making decisions.
Okay. So, and that is in there, but I will just put continue to make sure we define other contributions that are not code. Okay. Any other mantras or things?
Again, I haven't read it.
I know.
So I'm gonna stop trying to comment on it.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Moving on. All right. I will leave that and we will come back to that when we get there. All right. Kapil, you were mentioning this before we actually started the meeting about using GitHub discussions for questions.
Yeah, so currently we have a separate community repo that has discussions enabled. For better or worse. We're on GitHub. I don't see that really changing out. And the fact that, I've been using more and more of their services more heavily, and it's where our contributors are. So supporting additional capabilities as far as deeper integrations, using more of the capabilities of GitHub as a platform, so as to isolating ourselves from the platform seems worthwhile. And then in that context, we're looking at, I think, discussions, increased use of GitHub Actions, including for our functional tests, and potentially other things as well. I'd like to see code spaces support for developing on Custodian as well. Would be nice. But
okay.
There's a laundry list of things there. I think that we will continue to drive towards. But I think enabling discussions has inherent value. We see a lot of the same question over on chat, and unfortunately, just chat isn't that great at being searchable. So,
Yeah.
being able to surface out common questions off the main repo, I would probably say we probably need providers, provider separate sections, and then maybe a developer section as far as the broad groups, but also, open for discussion on if there's anything else that we're not having.
Yeah, like I could put meeting notes there and announcements, release announcements, maybe.
All out.
But we're gonna keep the Google group though, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll keep mailing lists and we will keep chat. I just want to explore additional as far as things that are forum based, and in that context, there's no point not to use that capability when it's there. And I think the reality is mailing lists are dead. Chat's active, but it is non-searchable, non-discoverable.
Searchable was not.
Yeah.
AJ. AJ and I invest, because I think what's useful there, if you do find something useful in Gitter, you could just paste it in the forum, even it's to yourself, and you would at least get a search. Maybe there's like a bot or something we can make where you could just click and auto copy stuff over, or literally anything. I think would be useful there. Okay, so I took an item. I'll go ahead and fire that up, set it up. I don't know if I have the GitHub permissions to do that, but Sunny would, right? I think. I'll find out this week. Okay.
I'm sure.
All right. Next, we're going to go into some hot PRs that we are going into. If you want to discuss any of these, just in the list here.
What is the fire explosion symbol?
The colon boom is when we're going to discuss something. So what I do is I write a script that looks at everything that's been opened since our last community meeting and closed. Then I post that to the Gitter channel. Or if people ping me throughout the week, hey, I need to make sure we discuss this or whatever. And then I put a colon boom on it. So the first one's a big one, which is AJ, you're driving this one, and it a bunch of these are related to this one. So
yeah, and that's going to change a bit after following some discussion with Kapil and Sunny yesterday. Sunny submitted a separate fix. So high level recap is we had some pin dependencies, one for GCP, one for Azure, some pin dependencies that weren't playing nicely with other projects. So if we tried to install them, there would be some dependency conflicts, and that led to a bunch of issues. We've had a few come in, some you've boomed here, George. And there was one with the, it affected our Docker install. It affected some, there are some other issues that all look related, at least partially, to this dependency conflict. So the initial thought, the minimal change, I was thinking, well, we could take this pin and just loosen the pins. So for GCP and Azure, for the PyTZ and James Path modules, so that everything would play nicely together. But then talking it through with Kapil and Sunny, we were saying, well, PyTZ, we don't really need this anyway. Let's just make this one line change, refactor a GCP metrics filter, so we don't need the dependency in the first place. And it's going to be a similar situation with James Path, where we'll get it as a like a transitive dependency, so we don't need to pin something at the top level. We're gonna pull it in. Kapil has thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't bring this up in the previous discussion, but I think part of the reason for PyTZ, so if you ignore PyTZ, then you're effectively looking up local time zone information from the operating system install, and that's not potentially normalized in the same way that PyTZ is across all time zone, and we're tracking back from GCP. So just an awareness thing as far as one reason why PyTZ would make sense, and the thing of least risk is just removing the pin in that context. The question about removing PyTZ, I think, needs additional validation to make sure that the time zones that GCP reports correspond to, like, to standard time zones, like, because you run into client side issues with regards to OS X, like Windows, different versions of Linux and which time zones where they have local. Because in the context where you don't have, say, TZ local and you're using like just straight UTC, or you don't have, there's not a full time zone database installed, then that can be problematic. Now, in the context of Docker, we don't have to worry about that. It's mostly just in the context of client-side installs, whereas PyTZ effectively normalizes that across client-side installations.
Interesting. So the change, I had just merged the change from Sunny because he took out PyTZ and the GCP metrics filter, it brought that behavior in line with what we're doing with AWS. So if you've got a concern for GCP, should we?
In AWS, all the server-side metrics are UTC. We only use TZ for off-hours filters, and in that context, it is based on local client, which is what the local TZ files. So I'm pointing out this difference because in this context, it's actually GCP sending the TZ, and
Okay.
so getting that map to client may be different. Let's say.
Okay. All right. So that's good extra context. So then I may restore that pin in this PR.
Oh, remove the pin and restore the code. Remove the pin.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. I put it back. Have a top level dependency on PyTZ again. Put that back in because that was just the PR from Sunny took out the PyTZ from metrics filter and took it out. I'll put it back in. But not pin to 2021. Just pin to just.
So in that context, I think we would need just to validate some GCP metrics filters from across a few different OSs. I don't. Ideally, we would actually be doing this in CI via unit tests. I don't know if they removed that change had an additional functional test, or sorry, additional unit test with flight recording. But that would also be interesting.
All right. If there are concerns about this, maybe it makes sense to put it back in and then just back up and evaluate taking that out sometime later. I don't want to try to fix it and just cause a more subtle breakage.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like that PyTZ thing was pretty shallow. Okay. Never mind. I think what. It's not equivalent though. Yeah, it would be nice if there was a unit test with this change.
Okay. All right. Let me just put this back.
Like UTC now returns a naive date time, and now the TZ returns a date time with a TZ. So this probably shouldn't have been merged just because those aren't equivalent in this context.
That's fair. All right, I'll undo that. Okay. The plan so then the PyTZ plan has gone back and forth a couple times then, but we should still include it as a top level dependency just without the version pin, I guess, so that Poetry will lock it and it'll be in sync across our projects. The James Path pin, we're still okay taking that out as a top level Azure dependency so that we'll pull it in. It'll just get pulled in as a transitive dependency underneath, and that still sounds good. Cool. Okay, so small changes, a lot of complexity hidden under those, if that's not clear from this whole discussion, but we'll try to get that sorted out and get a new release out sometime this week to help people be able to install things again.
All right, and just so I'm clear, this is going to be an out-of-band release to fix the mutual exclusivity installation, right?
Yeah, the initial idea I had was to try to make a release of just GCP and Azure, but talking through that sounds like that's a little too one-offy, and we don't necessarily want to do that. So we'll just try to get everything to a good state and then do a release of just do a full increment of all the packages.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
All right. Anything else on this one? I know some of these were related.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
those
a few
were
of the issues.
down
Yeah,
here.
a few of the
Yeah,
issues that you boomed are all either directly related or potentially
Yeah.
getting muddied by that stuff. So
Okay. So that was a chained boom.
chain boom,
Yeah. Next we have AWS lake formation.
Yeah, this and while we're talking about, roles of people taking on some form of maintainership thing, I should just say that I merged this and should not have merged this. So just say, like, publicly acknowledge this. I merged this prematurely. and we'll need to make some fixes to it before we do another release. There were, it was a new resource was adding an ARN type, and that was going to break some things. The resource name wasn't quite specific enough because like formation's a whole family of resources potentially, and if we release that, then it's going to cause problems later, backward incompatible changes and all that. So just want to make sure that's happy.
Yeah, no worries. Like I think I pointed out some of these in a different conversation, but I think there's always going to be some degree of just getting up to speed on being a maintainer. Like I'm not no per se concerns. We just want to make sure. I think as we are looking at moving toward more automated releases, we should always have some degree of manual review on what's coming out in the release, just so we can make sure we catch stuff before it affects users. But yeah, again, no worries.
That's why we have Git.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll get it sorted. So yeah, this one, it sounds like we should just not have, it had some tagging support and some ARN definitions. I think my latest, I've got a PR open to try to make this release ready, this lake formation. And it's basically just saying that resource type doesn't have an ARN. We're just saying ARN type false. It doesn't have any tagging support for tagging filters or actions because the actual resource that would be tagged is an underlying S3 bucket anyway. So that seems like a reasonable way to fix this before we release. But Kapil Sunny may have other ideas. Sunny's already done some review on it, so that's helpful.
Okay, so are we expecting this to go into this upcoming release or one after?
Yeah, well, so that one, the 7255 already got merged. I've got another PR that's making the fixes to it so that we don't release it in the state that it is. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a dependency on the release then, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Next we have 7252. Who's this? FSX backup checks?
Yeah, this one is from one of my team members into it. I have already done the review on it, but can always get additional eyes on it. This is to add in a filter to FSX, so to support compliance check that say you need to have X number of daily backup for FSX. I think there was a similar PR before for database RDS, and this is just something similar, but for FSX.
It's true. I remember
So
when
not sure who, yeah.
When we did the RDS one, yeah.
Yeah.
Someone want to take a look at this one?
Haven't looked at this one
You're
yet.
muted,
But
Kapil.
Yeah, just try to take a look right now.
The RDS one is 7190. I remember this one.
So a given I'm gonna just comment on here. So Darren, out of curiosity, do you know what on tap is referencing here? I
think it's the type of file system supported by FSX.
Okay.
Depending on the type, they have different ways to I guess handle backup.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm familiar with every other one of these file systems except for ONTAP. Okay. Luster open CFS Windows is Samba, but
I've never even heard of OnTap.
NetApp stuff.
okay. So
Huh.
They're AWS trying to steal NetApp business.
yeah, okay. I've added some comments in. Moving on.
Cool. This next one, 7237. Kapil, I believe you looked at this.
Oh yeah, that one's merged.
This is
this is more. This is a more of a higher level. Just to point out that our docs are getting built again and automatically on PR merges, and just seemed worth covering in this meeting, especially after the.
They're not technically on PR merges. They're after PR merges every hour.
They're getting okay. Sorry, more fine grained. So when we do a PR merge, our built docs as part of that merge are getting deployed to the GitHub Pages branch. Every hour, you've got a Lambda that's scanning that branch for changes and
You're
copying
both
them out.
correct.
The actual websites are vetted S3, and there's a Lambda that does the Git syncing to S3 every hour.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had for a while there. We were getting things partially through the pipe, and then it was getting stuck somewhere. We found it was just because we have too many docs. We've added too many docs. It got bigger than the Lambda was expecting, and
it was a new reference doc. I think the cloud control provider that pushed over the 512 limit in Lambda.
Now, do you foresee do we need another action that's doing the copy into the bucket? Or
we're good there. I think
are we keeping the Lambda? Are we just gonna raise the setting and be like, well, see you until you're broken next time? Or
I mean, frankly, I wouldn't. The fact that it increased that much is a bit of a surprise. I we 4x it to 2 gigabytes per se. If our repo checkout is more than 2 gigabytes, then I think we should be looking at how we slim that down. Be quite fair.
Yeah. Do we have a tracking issue for the doc size thing?
No.
I can make an internal card, and then when we take a look at it, then I guess we can make a.
I mean, I think it's just a question of making sure. I think the main thing is we still had source, which is generated, which we could remove, which will slim things down. It won't actually slim the repo size down unless we do some sort of something else, like slimming down the get repo size would require those objects not being reachable, which would potentially require rewriting the history on the branch or using something like various GitHub filtering tools to remove the excess, but retain the rendered output as part of the log on the GitHub pages branch.
Okay.
But again, I'm okay with it right now. 500 megs. But it's still big.
Let's celebrate working docs. Finally, yay! All right, and as I've said on this meeting many times, my end state goal there is to do the usual Netlify per PR preview and all that good stuff. So I've applied for those programs for their open source projects. That is a cool thing that would be neat to have. All right, the last big one for today is 7227 AWS Workspaces. I think this is something you reviewed, AJ, and I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. We had some back and forth there. It's good. I have left Peter hanging a little bit because of he had added some retry functionality, and it looked like it was kind of a new roll your own locally defined retry, and we have defined retry behavior that's kind of shared across resources. So I was looking to pull that in. Oh, and there's a comic book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
probably should have waited on that. Sorry.
Yeah,
No,
you should have mentioned that during the KubeCon
I
section.
should have. That's exactly
Yeah,
what I was
yeah.
thinking. I was like,
It's important
wait, I
stuff.
forgot to mention we have a cool comic book. I've been retconned to Joe, and but it talks about cloud governance and various different use cases that people do with Cloud Custodian as far as cost optimization, security, governance, operations. But I don't know how we get one of these to people. But we are going to have more of these at different events. So I don't know that we can do direct mailing, but
We'll figure something out.
sounds good.
So, all right then.
Yeah.
I think the action for you, AJ, then is just to point them to an existing one.
Yeah,
Existing
just
one, or-
rather than, I mean, Peter's been really cool, really patient, going back and forth, making some changes. I'll probably just go in there and try to update that retry behavior and send him a ping after that.
Yeah.
But I think it's looking pretty darn close. So
Cool.
that's good.
Cool. And something I like to do, if we discuss someone's thing, you could timestamp the video once we hit it on YouTube and be like, "Here's me explaining what I meant to say." So that's always useful.
Yeah, this
Oh.
is a good way. And you know, since Stephen, I see you're here too, and I know that you had reported that issue with workspaces with the connection status
Yeah.
filter.
I haven't got to retry. I did a workaround using API calls, but
But we can mention that. So thanks for joining, because I've seen your name all over GitHub, and now I see your
Yeah.
face.
I'm not a
and hear your
developer,
voice.
but I'll find your problems.
It's a good thing. Sounds great.
That's great. We like to hear when we have problems. So that pretty much handles all the booms, all these related issues. I think was from the broken thing resulted in a lot of filed issues, which is good to see. And then there are a few issues here in the notes that are actually questions that might be useful. And for you to, I like to browse when people post questions, so I can learn a little bit more every day. So I took an item to start to funnel all that stuff towards actions or towards GitHub discussions. I'll go ahead and set up a board and do all that good stuff and announce in all the right places. So hopefully that won't be too disruptive. That is all I have. As soon as I figure out how to unshare, there we go. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to say or feedback or anything?
Since I have Kapil here, I just reminded I still have those two PRs, really old PRs. If you can.
Yeah, I was looking for them earlier, but I don't even know when they're from.
7029 and 7129.
7129.
I think AJ actually has has left some comment and trying to do something for 7129. That's the one with the cider, how to do filter with list of
Yeah.
cider.
And is
Yeah.
the other
I think we
one
actually-
7029? Sorry.
Yeah, 7029. The other one has to do with adding support for manage config rule.
There we go. I PM'd in to you there, Kapil, so you have them for.
Yeah,
Straight.
no, we're 7029's been a discussion item previously. I think the only thing that was like, I think it's functionally it's fine. I think the only question was just this like if we turn something like the config manager role class into like a data class, but like, well, I don't know that there's any real reason to like it's you've been very patient, let's say, and maybe we should just move it in as is. Because I think we've already addressed the feedback that was present for it. Maybe. Well, actually, one question on enable. So currently we have it as enable config manage role as an account action. What if it was set so we could actually also remove some actions? We've been trying to, like, we have a bunch of enable disable like actions, and we've tried to like move to set as a general vocabulary just to enable both those use cases from single action to avoid some of the schema expansion and also just the vocabulary overload for users, to just have a consistent onset. But yeah, that I think would be the only piece of feedback. But yeah, maybe any calls. Yeah, and then putting in remediation, retries on put remediation configurations for the mutations on the API calls.
Can you repeat what you said about enable and disable? Are you saying to keep it consistent with the rest? That's something we need to add
Yeah,
to
so-
the action? Okay.
Right. So it would be like set, default active, let's say, and then you do the same thing you're doing right now. But if it was like set, but active false, then it would do the removal.
I
Like-
see. So, oh yeah, change it to set, and then it can be either enable or disable, and then act it accordingly.
Right, like
Is that what you're
enable,
saying?
add a Boolean for the enable versus disable, so to speak, on the configuration with a default enable. And,
Okay.
and then doing self.manager.retry around the API calls to make sure that those are, so if you're processing a set of, well, I actually, never mind, I take that back. It's still nice to have. We're not necessarily doing the same degree of volume here because we're just operating the account singleton. Like the actions 1-to-1 to is only operating on the one resource. So that's fine. But it would be nice to do just in case there's other concurrent activities in the account.
And you said that is for whenever I make some API calls?
Yeah, whenever you're doing a put or like any of the 1935 and 1939 are the two ones that I see. I can put a comment on that, but like I think it's a nice to have. I don't think it's a hard requirement, but it would be nice. And yeah, outside, like I think the set versus enable is the only thing that's a hard thing.
Okay.
The rest of it, I think, is fine.
Okay.
Just to make sure, like, so when we were just talking about the lake formation resource, part of it is that it's a non-issue because we never actually had a release with it in it, which I don't think we actually explicitly stated, but we did have a release, and we have to deal with the backwards compatibility aspects, which is the only thing, something that I always want to be conscious of.
For 7129, that PR, that one is a little bit tough in terms of what we want to do. I think it's I think we're unsure what we want to do, as a community right now. What AJ and I try to do is just handle it very like a small, I guess, like simple implementation just to support list ciders for filtering. But I think was it Todd? He has some grand ideas of, hey, if we were to do it, if we were to add support for a list of ciders, then we should do it right. Not sure if that's the right or wrong way to do it. But his idea is to actually convert everything into the IP networks rather than IP addresses. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he makes a valid point there about trying to collapse the addresses, and he called out some cases that I understand where he's coming from. I don't know. I was nervous to try to add more wrinkles to. I tried to combine 7129 and 5971, like roll some of the changes back, so 5971 ended up becoming kind of the both of them, the best of both, was the idea.
Sorry, which PR number were you referencing?
I just dropped it in chat. So there were two kind of competing implementations of how we handle lists of ciders. 5971 came first and kind of stalled. 7129 came later. It sounded like we had some discussions in a previous meeting. People generally seem to agree that the approach from 5971 was the better way to go, but 7129 had some useful stuff too, tests and docs, things like that. So I tried to pull that stuff in and kind of beef up 5971. The two issues left are that it was an old PR that was pre-Easy CLA, so Austin had opened it and we don't have his sign off. And then the only other open issue I'm aware of is Todd's comment about wanting to collapse networks before doing the evaluation.
I mean, we could definitely reach out to Austin. I think that in general, looking at value class, value filter, it could use a breakout refactor, I think, by value type. As a class, it's getting complex to look at. So putting that out there, not directly related, but I mean, we're at that tipping point. So wanted to call it out.
Yeah, I think that was the main motivation for leaning toward the 5971 implementation, because it doesn't touch value filter directly. And that was why it was a little bit nicer. It worked more against utils and the way that it parsed CIDRs. So it left the value filter match intact. But if folks think that adding this extra bit of functionality to collapse the networks into Todd put it pretty clearly, like the shortest aggregate of CIDRs in a list before doing that value filter match.
Yeah, I mean,
you can do that.
It looks pretty good as a solution for this as well.
What was that?
5971 does look pretty good for this as well, because it's encapsulated. I would also wonder, though, on the parse sitter, if we should be. Yeah, actually, that's pretty reasonable.
What is reasonable?
5971 seems reasonable.
5971.
Yeah, I mean, whichever one. I don't know. Like, if one of our issues that we're seeing as we grow the value filter is just the size of that class, and we need to break it out, then this is out of band and fairly transparent.
All right, then at least for now, to avoid some confusion, I'm going to close 7129 in favor of 5971, and then we'll try to work that unless one of those looks suggested that we should not do that.
I'd say you've been reviewing more PRs than I have, you and Sonny, so I'm going to defer to you guys.
All right.
Now we're making progress. All right.
Well, this is not. I like the PR, but the number of times we've talked about it and had to say, wait, which one's the active one? Because they're both open. Like, well, just close one. We can always reopen if we need to. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, KJ.
Anything else?
I have one question for the group. I don't know how people are doing it, but how do we handle exceptions? So we have policies that remediate or report, non-compliances, and then people want to ask for exceptions. I think I asked this in the past, and I think the direction that was given was to use the I think filter value where you can specify it's not in some like an exception file that you can then store in, let's say, an S3, right? An S3 bucket that has a list of all the exceptions. So that's what we have been using, but we will find it to be somewhat limited in what we can do in terms of being able to grab different values, things like
so it's a great question, and yes, that is our historical answer. Value from some file in S3. I think we do want to also support DynamoDB, but as an additional thing but we want to use, oh gosh, I've forgotten all these things. They have a query, they have like a SQL query language. We want to make sure that the query on the reach from the table is limited to that expression language. So that, because otherwise, if you have to go look at the full query language on an operator basis that you typically use with the DynamoDB API, it's inscrutable. Let's say it's not readable per se. And one of our core tenets, I think, with regards to policies, is hopefully they're very readable. May not always happen, but like the goal and the hope is that they're readable so that lots of different parts of of an organization and different roles within an organization can read a policy and feel confident in what it's doing. And so in that context, like simply embedding a query against DynamoDB gets into, it almost looks like programming, inside a YAML, and that doesn't feel right. But with the query language, gosh, I forgot the name. PartyQL is what it is, which is like a SQL-like syntax. I think that is fairly readable, and we should, if we want to expose that as additional capability. I don't know if that would solve off on some of the use cases that you're thinking about, Darren, versus simply having the S3 bucket, the S3 object as a referenceable thing. I think S3 is grand at this. Like you can do, like it's a solid way of doing integration that is out of band, but I think we are open to doing additional ones. And I think DynamoDB with PartyQL as a query that's expressed in the policy would also be viable. So an additional value from capability. One of the other challenges we've had in this context is specifically the value filter is not customized per se per provider. So that is the other consideration here, is making sure that you don't have to, and it's unclear to me how hard of a boundary we want to make this, but that between providers, but that you don't necessarily want to be in GCP looking at DynamoDB query language, let's say. And so making the value filter customized per provider for these additional provider-specific extensions also feels like something we should do as part of this land.
The other approach I was thinking of is, can it just be a call to some service, like a REST service for REST
So
API?
value from can hit a
I think
URL.
the problem that I have right now is being able to pass in different, I guess, queries or parameters. I think that's the hard part right now.
Then you have so in a REST style, or even in so you have the built native variables, so to speak. Sorry, the auto-injected variables that we do into policies at runtime.
Yeah.
With regard to account date, and you can actually insert those into a URL to hit a microservice or external thing, or even customize on the an S3 object that you want to reference. So I mean that's already possible per se today.
I think the main thing that's stopping us from using a REST API right now is actually kind of relate to the webhook call as well. Is it's pretty much expect everything to be wide open, and we need to be able to lock down our REST API. And with that, I don't think there's any way for us to lock it down and then somehow,
Well, I mean, this is again potentially why. So yeah, I think we're coming to the crux of the problem. Like, yes, you can do that in S3. It requires fragmenting lots of different objects out. Whereas in DynamoDB, this would be native and authenticated.
So with S3, we were able to use organization in AWS to allow into it, let's say, AWS account to query. But for REST API, we cannot do the same.
Correct. So I think in that context, DynamoDB would allow less. Okay. If you wanted to have like per account, or per account region, let's say, exception lists, you can do that in S3, but the fan out on the number of objects for that permutation, that combination is larger. Doing it in DynamoDB would offer like a single table aspect, and still be parameterizing the query out.
Okay.
So I think that's the value upside, I think, on doing something like DynamoDB in this context. It's just having to deal with less objects in S3 that you have to manage as sync integrations, let's say, on data vocabularies.
Cool.
All right. Anything else? Got 3 minutes. Oh, we got someone wants to get the last word in.
I want that. Oh.
Hello.
Are you in it?
Mohit.
They have like little pictures of you.
My name is Joe here, and the premise of this is like I'm my granddaughter in 2040 is asking me. That's me, the gray beard in there, and is asking me, about apparently I'm a cloud engineering professor.
Oh, so at least you know what you're going to do after retirement.
And it's about a robot named Juno and governance as code. And yeah.
I got to name the
It's
robot.
entertaining.
I got to name the robot. They're like, we need a cool name for a robot.
I knew we were working on one, but until I got to QCon, I had no idea what the storyline was. I was like,
Yeah.
What is this? Let me read it. But no, it was fun meeting. We also had the comic book artists there as well. So lots of interesting things. And definitely Valencia, the pie is quite lovely.
Yeah. Sounds
It
great.
is. It is apparently the home paella. So.
All right, and with that, we will see everybody in 2 weeks, same time. Last call. 3, 2, 1. All right, everybody, have a great week, and looking forward to seeing that release. Cheers, everyone.
Sounds good.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.